So yesterday in the team meeting, we're sitting around and Pranya Hridaya said, you know, it's a radically high ideal we're evoking here on this weekend. And I think it is. It is a radically high ideal. And in a certain sort of way, it should be. You know, why not? Why not reach for something that's unlimited? What are we going to do with our lives otherwise? So what I want to talk about is about this having a true Dharmic north. Maybe I've said quite a lot about what it might be. So I want to talk about when you do have a true Dharmic north, or have a sense that there might be a Dharmic north that exists, how do you align yourself to it? And maybe all I can say, because I don't know you very well, as Kshantikara said, all I can say is like, what's worked for me? Yeah, so what's worked for me? And I've found the workshops really, really stimulating. I found the communities workshop yesterday stimulating, the workshop stimulating, and also how people have engaged with this thing of communicating the Dharma. I found all of you and your engagement with things interesting, enjoyable. So I thought I'd tell you a little bit about my work life. I thought I'd tell you a little bit about my sort of living situations and the evolution throughout my ordination process and afterwards. And then I want to say something a little bit about my own ordination and what that was like. So when I first asked for ordination, I was working in a corporate environment. And I'd had this like really well-paying job. And you know, it was the financial crisis. I was working in the financial services. It was the financial crisis, but it's still very, very highly paid, well paid, and in a certain sort of way, really enjoyed my job. Towards the end, it got very, very hard, but for a long time, I did enjoy it, got a lot from it, learned a lot from it. And I asked Yanavacha, who was the chair at the London Buddhist Center at that time, do you think I can do that job and still train for ordination and join the order? And he said, if anyone can do it, you can. Which I thought was a very, very diplomatic answer, isn't it? If anyone can do it, you can. So I did try for a while. I tried a couple of times in different configurations. But one of the reasons why I left my job, many reasons, and I've probably given quite a lot of different talks on it, but one of the things that happened was when I was at one particular institution, I was quite senior by then. You know, I didn't have to like do the grunt work of staying till 11 o'clock. I could leave, you know, at a respectable time, which I decided for myself was going to be 6 p.m. So this was like the respectable time, and I wasn't going to stay before that, stay after that. But even waiting until 6 p.m., I used to kind of keep looking at the clock and just wish, oh, I wish it was 6 o'clock. It's already 6 o'clock in Paris. Like, come on, like 6 o'clock in London. And I mentioned it to somebody who I was living with, one of the women in the community, and she said, oh, it really sounds like you're just wishing your life away. Anyway, I did leave soon after that. One of the things that I tried to do leaving my corporate job was I did try to, well, after trying to own the world, I tried to save the world. So I went and did a master's in international development. And I just really thought that it would help me with the Bodhisattva ideal. In a way, it didn't really. One of the things I realized from studying humanitarianism, studying international politics, studying economics, was that really, once one's basic needs are met, it is all greed and hatred and delusion. Yeah. And I did really try. to I don't know, explore those fields genuinely. And I did seem to keep making the choice that actually what I was going to do was to train for ordination instead. So I did this 2-year master's at the LSE, and you can do it in exchange with different business schools or different universities all across the world. You could go to Singapore, like some of my friends did. One of the things that I wanted to do ever since my early 20s was to spend a little bit more time in New York. I'd spent about 6 weeks doing some training there, and I always wanted to go back. I just had this idea of myself in New York, and anyway, there wasn't a chance to go to Colombia for a year on exchange, and I really wanted to do that. One of my cousins was also studying at Columbia, and I decided that there didn't seem to be much study available. And I just really wanted to train for ordination, and Tonavakula is really, really far away from New York. So I was just going to stay and continue my friendships at the London Buddhist Center. And there were lots of different situations like that. I could have done this, could have done that. And always what seemed to be happening, not particularly consciously, was I always chose to train for ordination. Yeah. One of the things that I really loved in my corporate world, and I worked with this guy twice, is I was managed by a man called Matt, and he was such a good boss to me. He was somebody who was very, very straightforward, and he encouraged me. I was quite young when I started my career. I was only 23. I barely turned 23 when I started, and he really looked out for me. Gave me mentors who would help me, encouraged me. I sort of grew up under the care of these other bankers, basically, and he was a very good man and really, really helped me. And to this day, I think of him as somebody like a boon friend, a boon companion in my life. In fact, leaving my career, I did tell him that what I really wanted to do was to train for ordination. And the last email I sent before I went to Akashavana, I was sitting at a cafe somewhere in Tarragona, which is the big town outside of Akashavana. The last email I sent was to him, and I took a picture of myself with really short hair, and I said, that thing that I left investment banking to do, I'm just about to go and do it. I just wanted to let you know that it's definitely happening. I did get a really nice email back from him, and yeah. And that was a very, very formative relationship. Here's somebody who's not a Buddhist, he's just a nice guy, and he looked after me. And I used to dream about my work, that sort of corporate life quite a lot for many, many years after I stopped doing it. But more recently, in this year, I had a different dream. So I used to have these trading floor dreams. I would dream that I'm on a trading floor and all these different things would happen and Matt would be there. But this recent dream was a different dream. I dreamt that I was at a kind of drinks party and I met him, and he said, "Hey, we should go for a coffee." And I said to him in my dream, yeah, I'd love to go for a coffee, but only if you don't try to convince me to come back to the industry. And that felt like a really, really significant dream. And since then, I haven't had another trading floor dream. In fact, what's happened since then is I've actually cleared out my wardrobe. For some reason, I've been hanging on to these designer dresses and suits and things like that. And it's not as if I consciously thought I'm going to go back to banking, but somehow I was hanging on to it, and I cleared them out. Yeah. I think the main sort of commonality, the main common denominator between working for Sri Ratna like I do, for Future Dharma Fund, being really involved at the London Buddhist Center, being a trustee of all these different Sri Ratna charities, and investment banking, which is where I started my career, is that I just really want a life that will consume me. I really want a life that will sort of use all my energy. I want to be consumed. I want something that can take all the energy that I can give it. And I want to make a difference to people. Yeah? I really, really do want to make a difference to people. one of the real joys in my life is being able to help people across the world. Recently, I was here at Adhisthana on an order weekend. It was a women's order weekend. It's the first weekend of December, in case you're interested. Women's order weekend. And then I had to do a little bit of work on the order weekend. And one of the work emails I got was from this charity called Bahujan Hite in India. And we had just given them a grant. And the project coordinator had sent me a picture of these senior order members sitting in a women's leadership and empowerment workshop. So men and women senior order members in India sitting in a women's empowerment and leadership workshop because there are no women chairs of Buddhist centers in India. And I just thought, isn't that great? Here we are at Adhisthana on an order weekend, and there they are in India, doing this workshop on women's empowerment and leadership, trying to, change their minds, change the structures, and in doing so, change the world. Yeah. So I want to do want work that will consume me and make a difference to people. And then just sort of moving on to community living. I was really, really struck yesterday when I think it was Finn, said that it's hard to talk about these things because they're affairs of the heart. Yeah, it's affairs of the heart. So after I asked for ordination, I also asked to move into a women's community. In those days, it was quite hard to get a place in community. I think I asked about 2 years before I managed to get a place in community. For some of you, 2 years will sound impossibly long. It's like a tenth of your life or something, But I did wait 2 years. And Samayakula, which is a big women's community in London, is a wonderful place. It was a wonderful, wonderful training ground. And for a while, I was living with both my preceptors and both the women who I asked to be my Kalyana Mitras. Yeah. So it's really intensive. It's really, really intensive. It's really intense. And that's a very, very good training ground. And I lived there for 6 years, partly when I was doing my master's, partly when I was working in investment banking, and also partly when I was working at the London Buddhist Center. I also got ordained when I was living there, and I came back to Samayakula. And one of the things that happened whilst I was living there, in fact, it was only like maybe 2 months into living at Samayakula, Manjusiya, who's another order member, asked me to marry him. So I went back and told the community, hey, guess what? Manjusiya asked me to marry him. And it's like dead silence. And Shradasini, bless him, she said, that's great! But they were the only one. Anyway, we did get married, and I did continue to live at Samayakula. Manjusiya did all sorts of things. He lived in Sukhavati, he lived in a flat, he lived in our flat, he went to Padmaloka. But I stayed put at Samayakula. So I just wanted to say that because I think it's not a usual situation that somebody would live in community, get married, and then just continue living in community. In a way, Manjusiya and I hope it's okay to say this, Manjusiya and I feel like we are committed to having a marriage that does not need to be conventional, let's put it that way. Maybe it's like a myth of our marriage, our relationship, that doesn't need to be conventional. We do actually really think about things quite a lot and kind of go back to the first principles of what are we really trying to achieve here? And it has worked for us. It might not work for everyone, but it has worked for us. And part of the reason why I think it's worked for us is because he's quite a confident person. I guess, I don't know if you have been exploring this thing of true individual group and spiritual community in your discussion groups, but both of us, I think, are committed to growing into true individualship, if you like. We're both fairly confident, and I think that does make a big difference. Yeah, confident and confidence-giving. He is very, very confidence-giving. Just a little example. One of the things that I feel like quite shy about, because I think it's a little bit of cultural conditioning, is that I really love my teachers. I really, really love my teachers. And sometimes I feel a bit shy about that, because I would say that generally the world doesn't like experts. At least this culture doesn't like experts, doesn't really like looking upwards. But I really love my teachers. And he really encourages me to do that. Yeah. So one of the reasons why I mentioned Manjushri is because he's been a lot on my mind. Because after about 6 years of me living in Tonavakula, I then moved out to live with him in our flat, about 10 minutes walk away from the London Buddhist Centre. For the last 3 years, we've been living in our flat together. Very, very nice flat. I mean, it was locked down as well. And so I thought it was quite lucky in a way, like of the different situations one can be locked down in. It's not too bad a situation. And in January, so the 1st of January, I left Adhisthana and moved into Navakula women's community where Ariane is for 2 months initially. I thought I'd be there for 2 months and then I'd just go back to the flat. But about a week into me living at Navakula, Manjushri said to me, "Oh, you know, I think you should be free, you should feel free to stay, to decide to stay at Navakula." So he really encouraged me to think about it. In my mind, that wasn't actually a possibility, but he opened the door for it. And at Navakula, I do feel really, really spiritually well. I don't really quite know how to explain that except just by illustrating it with a little story, which is after I moved into my flat with Manjushri, I noticed that I was getting into a really bad mood in the evenings. So it's a 10-minute walk from the LBC to our flat. And in that 10-minute walk, I'd often check my emails, which is really bad, you know. If you're leaving work, don't check your work emails, because mostly you can't really do anything about it. It just puts you in a bad mood if something goes wrong. And then what I would then do is I'd sit at a dinner table and complain about this whatever annoying thing that happened, or etc., etc. And because there were the only two of us, I had 50% of the airtime, and because he's extremely introvert, I had 90% of the airtime. And those of you who live with other people will just know that, unless they love you a lot, no one's going to let you get away with that, yeah? So it's a Mayakula, which was the women's community I sort of started out in. I had 1/12 of the airtime, and no one was going to let me sit there day in, day out and complain about work, yeah? But because Manjushri loves me, he just let me. And it was just really bad. It was really bad for me, yeah? So I don't do that in Navakula. It doesn't even cross my mind to do that. So that's one way, just a little example in which I feel spiritually well. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that living in a couple is bad. It's really, really good. It's given me a lot of confidence. And there are some things that structurally it just doesn't provide. Yeah? Okay. Yeah, so I just want to sort of round off that little bit by saying something about Bhante's aphorism that commitment is primary and lifestyle is secondary. And by commitment, I sort of translate that in my head as going for refuge to the three jewels as primary. So I want to say something about ordination. We've been talking about work as change-making, community living as change-making, but I do want to say something about ordination as change-making. When I was ordained at the Kashavana, which is our retreat center in the mountains of Spain, where women get ordained, and I was lucky enough to be ordained on a 3-month retreat. So it's a long retreat, living in a small community. Well, I say small, it's about 21 of us. And there was a part of me that felt very, very satisfied on the ordination retreat. It was a very harmonious retreat. We all got along, and we really loved each other. And we were moving together in a particular direction. You get the sense of this sometimes at the end of pujas. When you just feel like everyone's chanting the mantra. We're all going somewhere. But like times 1,000, because every moment of 3 months is like that. And it was very, very satisfying. I felt like something primal, something primitive in me that just enjoyed being part of a pack. It's kind of like, it's almost like an animal sense. Was really, really satisfied. But it was more than that, because where we were moving was not kind of like packhood. It wasn't like we were hunting. It was something, I don't know, bigger, higher, deeper, whatever your metaphor is. It was very satisfactory, and it was very clean. That was the other taste of it. It felt very clean and very pure. And I went for a walk with Subhadramati, who is my public preceptor, before she ordained me. So I already had my name, but I didn't have my kesa yet. So I was in that sort of in-betweeny time between the private ordination and the public ordination. And we had this long chat about what the ordination would be like for her, what the ordination would be like for me. And I asked her something about her order life. I can't really remember what I asked her, or really what she said. And then she sort of like turned the question back on me. And I found myself talking about the path of responsibility. That was this like strong intuitive sense that I had. I don't think I'm that great on intuition. I'm not very hot on intuition. But just suddenly there's this feeling of there was a path unfolding ahead of me, and it felt like responsibility. But not responsibility in like the heavy, dutiful way, but the kind of responsibility that brings opportunity and joy, and that helps myself and helps other people. These days, when I think about what that responsibility is, I think of it as a responsibility to love. Yeah, the responsibility to love others. And sometimes that's very, very practical. I remember about a year after I got ordained, Subhadramati had this a chat with me just about me and what I was doing at the Buddha Center. And she just sort of said quite bluntly, in her very sort of Scottish way, you are like currently the bright, young, shiny new order member, but very soon you won't be. And the best way to deal with that is to take other people on. It was quite interesting actually, because the person in both our minds was Kshantikara. He's going to be like the bright, young, shiny order member, and then lo and behold. And that's what I did, sort of like tried my best to help people, help Kshantikara, became friends with him. Yeah. It feels like a responsibility to love. Okay, so in a way, I guess what I'm trying to say is that aligning to Dharmic North is a process of making choices. It's making choices all the time. When I was training for ordination, one of the things that I really, really remember that Vajratara said was, the great lie is that you can have it all. Yeah, you can't have it all. You can't have it all. You have to choose. And then in my mind, that particular teaching sits alongside another teaching which you can find in Subhuti's 5 Aspects of the Spiritual Life about integration. That we need an integrating principle that's big enough, that's unlimited enough. And what he's really talking about is the 3 jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, that can contain all of us, the whole mandala of our disparate energies, and not just contain it, but give order to it, give meaning to our energies. So I just want to finish by evoking the 3 lines of acceptance, because I feel like more than the precepts, I don't know if this is like a terrible thing to say, but more than the precepts, I feel like these lines of acceptance guide my life, guide my choices. So with loyalty to my teachers, I accept this ordination. In harmony with friends and companions, I accept this ordination. For the sake of enlightenment, I accept this ordination. And for the benefit of all beings, I accept this ordination.